Hello and welcome back to Study History with Mr. P and my GCSE topic summary video about the Battle of Hastings. So this took place on the 14th of October 1066 with the armies of William of Normandy facing off against the King of England, Harold Godwinson. Both armies were fairly evenly matched in terms of numbers. So William had about 800 knights and something like up to 6,000 foot soldiers, which were a mixture of Normans and hired soldiers from all over Europe. Some were archers, others had armour, shields and a javelin or sword. Harold's army massed 6,000 to 7,000 in total, but most were hastily assembled fjordsmen. The thanes, the hardened battle soldiers, had good weapons, shields and armour, but most, as I said, were the general fjords, and they had only agricultural tools. So, to start off with, unlike the Battle of Stamford Bridge, Harold did not achieve the element of surprise. So he did attempt to surprise William with his rapid march south, but this failed because of William's scouts. They saw Harold's men coming, and the two armies therefore met. So perhaps in some ways Harold was incredibly hasty in rushing south, leaving many of his great or best soldiers behind. But a scramble took place for control of the battlefield. Harold captured the high ground, forcing William to attack uphill. At the start of the battle, William sent his foot soldiers in first, so his infantry and cavalry went forward later to try and break down the shield wall, but they failed. William's archers attacked first, but the shield wall was able to deal with this. So after this came the infantry and cavalry, but the horses couldn't charge uphill, and the English soldiers' two-handed axes and javelins were effective at dealing with the Norman attack. Overall, the battle lasted almost an entire day, 8 hours in total, and there were waves of attack throughout the day. For a large part of the battle, the shield wall of Harold Godwinson's army stood firm. Then at one point in the battle, a rumour went round that William had been killed. This worried his troops, but William, showing his bravery, raised his helmet to show that he was alive and rallied his troops. There was also a tactic used by the Normans during the battle known as the feigned retreat. So when Normans on the left flank ran down the hill, English soldiers broke ranks, so many of the fjordsmen broke ranks and followed. They were then cut down by the Normans who turned back. Historians actually think the weakening of the shield wall happened due to a deliberate tactic by the Normans known as a feigned retreat, which I've just described, where the Normans pretended to flee and then turned back. Either way, they repeated this tactic a few times through the battle, and the shield wall began to break up because the fjordsmen had been lured down from the hill. Now the shield wall itself, the main tactic of Harold's army, wasn't a single line of men. Behind the shields were lines of warriors using javelins, spears and axes together with the shield wall. But once the numbers of English started to fall, this strong defence weakened. This in turn then meant that the Norman cavalry could punch through Harold's defences. Despite this, Harold and his army fought on. Harold, with his brothers and the housecarls, came together to make a last stand, but Harold and his brothers were killed. The housecarls in turn fought to the last man, at which point the remaining English fled from the field and the Normans were victorious. But there were a number of reasons for this victory. We can broadly break these reasons down into tactics, leadership and luck, or God's will. So the tactic of the shield wall used by Harold had been effective in the past and was very effective against William for certainly the early stages of the battle, but it was the Anglo-Saxon tactic. William, on the other hand, had a mixture of different troops and was able to try different tactics during the day of the battle. William's archers became more effective during the day when the shield wall became depleted because they could get closer and get to the gaps in the shield wall. Now the shield wall may have weakened for a number of reasons, perhaps because of a lack of discipline by Harold's soldiers when they chased the Normans downhill, and also because the Norman retreat may have been a tactic called a feigned retreat. Either way, it was this weakening of the shield wall which allowed Norman tactics to be more successful. But that said, leadership certainly played its part. So William's leadership was crucial to victory because he had waited throughout the summer for the right time to invade and managed to keep his forces together. He was well prepared when arriving in England, and he showed leadership throughout the battle, such as showing his face when a rumour spread amongst his army that he had been killed. Now Harold's own military leadership was incredibly well regarded, but Setting up his Southern Army way back in May was a problem because he'd had to maintain it for 4 months and then disband it before the invasion occurred. He'd then gone north, as we know, to defeat Harold Hardrada at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, but after hearing of William's invasion, rushed south. He could have taken his time and chosen to wait in London to regather his troops, to rest and so on, but he chose to lead from the front and not do so. But this tactic may have been his downfall, or this action may have been his downfall. Now, all equally, Harold planned to surprise William by marching south so quickly, but this failed. And it was in many respects William who actually launched a surprise attack on the day of the battle by starting the battle so early in the morning. But these were not the only reasons. Luck or God's will played its part. Both sides took risks, and it was William's risks, William's luck that paid off. Harold, for example, just fought a battle against Hardrada, as I've said. He then had to march south to face William. This was bad luck because he'd waited for many months in the south of England for William and had only marched north when Harold Hardrada invaded. So Harold had had troops ready on the south coast for most of the year, and it was only after they disbanded, as I've said, that this invasion came. Equally, William was quite fortunate. He set sail during the season of winter storms, but fortunately managed to land safely. He'd insisted upon taking his own horses rather than relying on English horses because they were better trained, but at the same time this was risky because they could easily have been sunk at sea. The winter storms, for example, destroyed Harold's own fleet that winter, and yet William had been able to sail safely across. Nonetheless, this combination of factors led to William's victory in the Battle of Hastings. If you look out for my next video, you can look at what William then did after winning the battle.